Welcome to the Be Dadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
And just like that, we are back, folks. Welcome back to the Be Dadly podcast. I'm Brandon Jones, your host. I'm very excited, as you can tell, because I am opening a brand new segment of the podcast up. I interviewed over 30 fathers and asked them about their challenges with raising their kids, or maybe even managing their own anger, and just what were their goals for being a father. And out of that, I also asked, what do they believe an ideal solution is for receiving the kind of information that could be useful to their family? And literally every person, every single dad said podcast. And while I have a podcast rather, I didn't have a solution-focused podcast. I've been interviewing great fathers, amazing fathers with unique and great stories, and I want you to be sure to check those out. But I thought, why don't I start doing this in a more practical sense, especially after these interviews? I saw the value in being very practical and giving you solution-focused episodes. And that's exactly what this is. My goal is to help you parents experience more joy, peace, and just fun in your home by providing you with the most respectful and effective parenting tools and strategies available. The aim of these new episodes is to help you reduce the anger, frustration, and guilt that often accompanies being a parent while raising children and improving their odds, really, of raising happy, healthy, independent adults, right? Because we don't want to raise grown adolescents. We don't want to raise children that are just victims. We don't want to raise children that have no sense of responsibility or integrity or understand the true values in life, and instead are kind of caught up in the modern society, and really I'd say this sick society's vision of the world, right? The vision of the life, that get rich quick, empty life. We want to raise children that understand the values in life and how to really pursue true happiness and long-lasting joy. So I wanted to be sure to make these episodes for you, and I hope you'll get a lot out of them. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a very important distinction. And this is one of the most important distinctions that I've ever found in parenting, and that is the difference between punishment and discipline. Right? What's the difference between punishment and discipline? Because a lot of times I say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to parent without punishment. Boy, I get a lot of pushback from that. You know, dads are like, yeah, you're going to raise a child that's going to be a school shooter. Children need punishment, etc. But what they don't realize is what I'm saying is to get rid of punishment, but not get rid of discipline. And I used to think those were the same thing. We're going to talk in this episode about how they are not the same thing. Punishment and discipline are different. What are those differences? How can we embody discipline, and how can we start to remove punishment? And why would we even want to? Why does it even matter, right? So we're going to talk about that in this episode. Before we do, I just want to give a shameless plug here. If you've been struggling with constant misbehavior, maybe you've been yelling a lot in your house, you've been feeling like there's a lot of tension in the home, maybe your child's been struggling at school, and you're struggling with constant misbehavior, and you think, man, maybe there's a better way, I would love for you to book a consultation. Go to www.bedadly.com and book a consultation. It's absolutely free. You and I can discuss your biggest challenges and how I might be able to help you. You will be able to get on with me personally. You just go to www.bedadly.com if you want to experience more joy in your home and you want to get that sense of confidence that your children will be successful. They will be successful adults, and that you yourself will parent in a way that you can be proud of. If that sounds like something that you're interested, go to the website, book consultation, and let's get on with it. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and get into the show. What's the difference between punishment and discipline, right? And why does it matter? Well, this distinction is so important that it's actually put in the beginning of many books. Positive Discipline and No Drama Discipline especially pointed this out to me. And I remember whenever I first realized, I was like, wow, it's subtle, but it's important. It's important, right? So the difference between punishment and discipline is that punishment is done with blame, shame, anger, disrespect. It's often unrelated to the consequence. Unrelated to the offense. So what I mean by that is if Sally and Johnny are playing in the back seat of the car and Johnny gets angry at Sally and he hits her because he's angry, and then you tell Johnny, well, you can't have ice cream now, he might feel like that's totally like, where did the ice cream come in? How is that even fair? It's not even related. And because it's not related, the child gets hung up on your punishment as opposed to learning the lesson, right? As opposed to learning that, hey, we shouldn't hit somebody else. So sometimes we use these unrelated consequences, and that would be a form of punishment. So punishment is punitive. It makes a child feel bad about who they are. It makes them feel bad about what they did. Now, children are going to make a ton of mistakes. So if throughout their childhood, we attack them every time they make a mistake, what do you think the outcome will be? Likely, they're going to be afraid to make mistakes. I know that growing up when I was a kid, I was really afraid to make a mistake. But we do know as adults that mistakes are part of the formula. And if you ask any successful person, they will tell you, you have to make mistakes. Because when we make mistakes, we get an incredible amount of information back, and we can use that information to correct the course and make improvements. And that is the only way to become successful. You didn't walk without making mistakes. You didn't ride a bike without making mistakes. You won't build a business without making mistakes. You won't even have a great relationship without making mistakes. So mistakes are part of the process. So we don't want to make children afraid of making mistakes, but punishments often inadvertently do that. Okay. And so punishments, because they're handled with so much disrespect and so much anger, they often distract from the learning opportunity that's available within that mistake. How's discipline different? How is discipline any different than punishment? I likely, like you used to think, I mean, this is for me, I thought they were the same thing. I literally thought that punishment and discipline, that's the same thing. If my child does something wrong, I punish them. That's me embodying discipline. Turns out they're different. They're different all the way down to the root word, all the way down to its origin. Discipline, think about it in the word. The word literally has disciple in it. Discipline actually comes from the Latin word disciplina, which actually means to teach. So discipline is all about teaching. Punishment is not all about teaching. Punishment is about making someone feel bad and feel guilty and feel afraid to do that act again. And I love this quote. There's this great quote, is nothing is more despicable than respect based on fear. Right? Think about that for a second. If the respect your child has of you is only because they are afraid of you, that's not really a good version of respect, right? Do you respect someone because you respect them? You respect their values, their virtues, their attributes, their characteristics? Or do you respect them because you're afraid of them? That's kind of a really important distinction. Our children should respect us because of the kind of person we are, the kind of man we are, the kind of woman we are, the kind of parent we are, the kind of values that we embody, the kind of virtues that we display, the kind of characteristics that we demonstrate. That should be where respect comes from. But whenever we use punishment, we get respect, but it's out of fear. And so I think you would agree with me that that's not really the best way. So how do we embody discipline? And let's get back to how it's different first. Discipline is different in that discipline is all about teaching. It's about helping bridge the gap between the challenge that we see in our child and the characteristic and life skill that they need to overcome that challenge. And I do this exercise with parents a lot where I ask them, what are the challenges that you currently face with your children? And I hear things like disrespect, not being responsible, cleanliness, not being, hygiene, health, just being disorganized. And those are common challenges. And what's amazing is that if you think about the characteristics and life skills, being responsible, being respectful, being organized, practicing determination, practicing, different kinds of characteristics and life skills, you realize that there is a total link. And when a child is on the challenging side, they're really just missing the skills. They're missing the characteristics that would help overcome those challenges. And if you think about it, the challenges that we face are literally the perfect opportunity to develop and learn the value of those characteristics and life skills. So if we take a bigger and broader perspective here for a moment, when we see our child challenging, or we see the challenges within our child, we need to recognize that those challenges are the opportunity for them to learn the value of those characteristics and life skills, and for them to start to practice having those characteristics and life skills. For me, with this perspective, I can take a little bit of a break for a second. I can kind of pull myself away from the problem, and I can go, they're struggling. They're struggling to have the characteristic of responsibility, or the skill of communicating well, the skill of conflict resolution. They just are missing this skill. So if I were to teach them this skill and help them practice this skill and help reinforce this skill, we wouldn't have that challenge. And in fact, they would be able to meet their challenge without even us having to constantly be over them. And isn't that the long-term goal? Isn't the long-term goal to empower our children to such a point that they are independent and then ultimately interdependent, where they are a contributor to our family in a way that is meaningful, and that they integrate with our family in a way that serves the entire group because they are independently resourceful, independently capable, and now they can contribute in a meaningful way? That's the ultimate goal anyways. So if we can get along with that, then we can start to move towards discipline as a mode of helping them achieve those characteristics and life skills, as opposed to punishment, which often actually exacerbates the challenges that we are currently experiencing. Now, before we get into the how, I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about this because I really want this to sink in. When you developed responsibility, determination, empathy, and a variety of other skills and characteristics, organization, any skill that you currently have or characteristic that you currently have in your tool belt, when you developed it, was it a pleasant experience? Did you enjoy it? Because if you were anything like me, I did not like learning how to be responsible. It was no fun. Being organized, it was way easier to be disorganized, right? Practicing conflict resolution, it was way easier to just be angry and blame somebody else. So it's not necessarily fun to develop these characteristics and life skills. In fact, it's challenging. And yet, I wouldn't trade the characteristics and life skills that I have developed for anything, and I don't think you would either. So we have to let go of the idea that our children are just going to enjoy learning these characteristics and life skills, and recognize that it's going to be hard. That is the nature of it. To develop these skills, you're going to kind of wreck a few times. You're going to kind of struggle. You're going to not enjoy the moment. But once you have it, you'll never trade it for anything. And it's the same is true for our kids. So when we see them dealing with a challenge, and we see them not having the characteristic and life skill under their tool belt yet, we just have to recognize that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but once they can meet that challenge, once they acquire that skill, it's going to be something that they'll have for a lifetime. So I hope that helps you feel a little bit more motivated to practice some empathy with your kids, and also to look at things from a process perspective and a skills gap perspective, so that you can help them face their challenges with a little bit more grace and a little bit more of that teacher, coach, parent role, where we're not punishing them all the time, but we're actually helping reinforce those characteristics and life skills. Now, that doesn't mean that children won't ever experience consequences. That doesn't mean that children won't experience boundaries. It doesn't mean that you need to become permissive. So stick with me if you're concerned about that, because that is absolutely not what we're talking about here. And I think that's often the concern is, well, if I'm not punishing them, then am I really teaching them a lesson? And I'm going to show you in just a few moments, I'm going to show you how you can teach your child a lesson without actually punishing them, which is super cool. In my opinion, it's extremely rewarding and very, very cool. So before we get into that, I want to talk to you about this idea of what happens if you keep punishing. What's the result of the experience for your child and for yourself if you keep punishing? You just use punishment as the mode of parenting. So Jane Nelson outlines these 4 R's, and I've personally experienced them. I want to see if you've experienced them, but they're the 4 R's of punishment. So that first R is resentment. It's about you feeling that sense of unfairness, that the child believes, this isn't fair. The way that I'm being treated for my mistake is unfair, and they start to build up resentment, right? So think about it. If you keep using punishment, there's resentment built up. And from my experience, this resentment goes both ways. I feel resentment towards the child for making me angry, for, violating this rule again, etc. But also my child feels resentment for being misunderstood, for not understanding the child's intentions, and for the punishment itself. To them, they feel like it's unfair, right? And especially if we're using unrelated, disrespectful consequences, then we might find that the child does find that unfair. So the next R is revenge. So let's say the child has experienced some resentment and you keep punishing them. And tell me if you resonate with this. Maybe you even experienced this as a kid. They want revenge. They're like, you have done something wrong to me. You have mistreated me. You've treated me with so much disrespect. You've violated my dignity. And now I'm angry at you. And so I want revenge. So when we use punishment, it can lead to that sense from the child that they want revenge. The next R is rebellion. So the child's been punished a lot. They keep being punished. And eventually they get to this point where they say, you know what? I'll do it just the opposite way. Because somewhere inside of us, we all want a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of power. And whenever we punish our children, there can be this part of them, this little fiery part of them that says, I want to rebel against your way. I want to prove to you that I don't have to do things the way that you want me to, right? And so a strong-willed child, they become rebellious. You've been punishing them and they become rebellious. And it gets to a point where your punishments are not effective anymore. And that is a very frustrating place to be as a parent. I have been there. Not cool. It's not fun. It is totally not fun. Now, the last R, and I believe this is the worst R. It comes in 2 forms. But the R is retreat. The child being punished eventually gets to this point where they retreat. And they retreat into 2 ways. The first one is sneakiness. They start to think to themselves, I got to figure out how to not get caught. The problem isn't that I need a life skill or that I need to change something or I need to embody something new. The problem is my parents. And if I just didn't get caught, everything would be fine. And so then the child becomes sneaky. And man, children can become extremely, extremely sneaky, especially today with the different interfaces and the ways that they can kind of, it seems like they're present in the room, they can kind of escape through those interfaces, right? So we don't want our child to become sneaky. Punishment can lead to that. When you have punished a lot and the child has gone through these different phases, they can get to this point of retreat where they try to hide things from you. The last R, which I believe, or the last part of this R, this retreat, is what I believe the worst of all. And I got to this place with my kid, and this is why I'm even doing this, you guys. This is why. This is the crux of it all. This is the motivation, the catalyst for me being on this mic right now, talking to you. It was because my child arrived at this R. And this is the retreat in the form of reduced self-esteem. This is when the child has taken their behavior on as their identity. I remember the day that my son said this, and it breaks my heart today. I still get emotional every time I say this because it was such a powerful moment in my parenting. It was the day my child said, I'm sorry, Dad. I don't mean to make you and my teachers angry. I'm just a bad kid. Guys, that is the day that broke my heart. I knew right then and there, something needs to change. This is not what I want my child to believe. I do not want him to believe that he is a bad kid. He's made mistakes, a lot of them. He sometimes misbehaves, actually a lot. He misbehaves a lot. But he's not a bad person. He's not a bad kid. There's not something innately wrong with him. He just has bad habits. I have bad habits. You have bad habits. And that's human, right? But he got to a point where he was taking this on as an identity. And when that day happened, I realized I need to question some of the ways in which I've been correcting him. Because I have been reinforcing this belief within him. And now he has this reduced self-esteem. And I'll tell you, it took a lot of work to get him out of that hole. It takes a lot of work. Once a child takes this belief on, it takes a lot of work. And you don't want to get there. So if you're not there yet, please listen to how we use discipline, because it is a big difference maker. And number two, if you are there, please reach out. I would love to work with you. I would love to help you, because this is a hard thing for children. And we have to learn how to reinforce that they are human, that we all make mistakes, that mistakes are part of the process of becoming successful. They will make mistakes for the rest of their life, and that it's okay. But we got to work on it. We got to keep making improvements. We got to take and look at our results and take a real hard look at it and make adjustments when necessary, but we don't want our children to experience that. And that can happen, right? Those are the 4 R's of punishment from Jane Nelson in her book, Positive Discipline. That can happen, guys. That can happen to your children. Have you experienced that with your children? Have you seen them go through any of those phases? Do they become rebellious? Have they wanted revenge? Have you felt resentment? Have they experienced reduced self-esteem? Have they become sneaky? Right? If that resonates, it's likely because of punishment. That's the thing. So how do we move into discipline, right? How do we embody consequences and hold boundaries and do all those things without making them go through those 4 R's? So I hope you're enjoying this episode. This one got a little bit long, so we're going to actually split it up into 2 parts. I hope you learned a lot about punishment there. What I'd love for you to do is, if you're enjoying this episode, be sure to like, share, and comment. And also join us for part 2, where I explain exactly how we implement discipline. And I hope you have a beautiful, blessed day, and we'll see you in the next episode. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.